Hi, I'm Doug Morris. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at CSI. This is a short video on iMove best practices. First off, please remember support at csinc.com. Love to hear ideas from you on this product and new products, ideas at csinc.com, and of course, to purchase any of our products, sales at csinc.com. Step one, hey, make sure you're on our latest version, and that's done by going to our website, clicking on downloads, logging in with your username and password. If you don't have that, you can go ahead and shoot an email over to support and we'll get you set up. You're going to go down, you want to make sure you get the latest version of iMove, which is 2.5.4 as of February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. So that's important. Grab that, download, and you're going to go ahead and install that. Now, when you go to log on the first time after installing 2.54, go get yourself a cup of coffee. We found a bug in the product and we were not purging the backup tables on a regular basis. So some of you have backup tables in your database that are rather large, and iMove is going to sit there and think about that for a little bit. And then it's going to give you this wonderful message that says, hey, we got a problem. I need to truncate this. We do need to erase all the backup, and the fastest way to do that is truncating. And so you're going to go ahead and say okay on that, and it's going to purge your backup table for iMove, which you probably have never used, but it is there. So go ahead and do that. And when you're done with that, you're going to be able to get into iMove, and you're not going to have that issue again. So best practices, go to Tools Options, and you want to go ahead and confirm your options that are set up. Most of us, by the way, Accumail only works for US addresses right now. So you do normally want to include blank countries because we tend to not write US or USA. If you do on some of your addresses, you can tick this checkbox right here, include non-blank, and then choose any of the addresses that you mark as United States. So you might have United States in here or USA or anything like that, and you'll check the addresses that might have that. So what that means is iMove is only going to look at addresses where the country is blank or we have a non-blank country that is set to one of these. Of course, we recommend you do business, family, and individual moves. Moves are actually coded per the national change of address based on what type was. If your entire family moves, you're going to have that. If you grow up and move out of your house, that's going to be an individual move. iMIS only logs primary address changes, primary mail, if you will, or preferred mail. iMove will log all of them, so we recommend you turn this on. If you're using Flowdown, if you have company records that have addresses or individuals attached, you can turn this on and it will flow down the address changes to child records where appropriate, meaning if the child record has the same address as the company record, then it will move it. But if for any instance where you don't have that, it will not flow it down. This is a fun one here. Ignore address 2 and 3 fields. The post office really only looks at the first line of your address. And so your best chance is to only send up that first line. But if you send up the other 2 lines, you actually have a chance of causing iMove not to understand the address. When I say iMove, I'm talking the post office. So if you give the post office too much data, it might say, I don't have a move on file. So we tend to recommend ignoring address 2 and 3 fields, but it is up to you. For instance, if I had an address in my iMIS that was 855 West Prairie Avenue, and that was my, street address, and then line 2 said care of Doug Morris, and line 3 said important, we don't want to send that up to the national change of address, so we want to ignore those. We recommend using standard options. We do allow you to call your own stored procedure here. It's not really recommended, but you can do that. There's the ability to call a stored procedure after the updates. If you have custom code that you want to run after iMove is finished, you could do that too. I don't recommend doing this. This says if I'm going to be moving in a month, I can go ahead and fill out my change of address. And the post office knows that on March 1st, I'm going to have my mail forwarded. You can tell iMove, hey, if you find something in the future, go ahead and change their address in iMIS now. Not a good idea, but you can do it. Finally, always zip +4 and standardize your address. That's going to turn 855 West Prairie Avenue into 855W Prairie Avenue. Good idea. And then I like to keep some backups. It's up to you how many you want to keep. I've set it as 3 in my demo. You might say 2, you might say 1. If you're sending up 300,000 records to iMove on a regular basis, you might set that to 1. If you're sending up 20,000, nothing wrong with 3. Okay. Now we're going to talk about bad address mapping. We've made a lot of tweaks to the product here. There was some misunderstanding in the world out there, so we're going to go over this best practices. What you are going to want to do is head on over to our documentation, which is right here. And if you go to that, you'll be able to see all of this address mapping stuff, if you will. But let's walk through it. First off, we're going to set up our bad address lookup table in iMIS, and I'm going to talk about simple and verbose here in my overview. A simple one would be, I want to know when an address is bad, and I want to know when it's lost. In this case, bad means it's not a good address in iMIS. It is a address that Accumail doesn't like. So in an example I'm going to give you in a minute, 854 West Prairie Avenue doesn't exist. It's a bad address. So I might mark an address bad if there's something wrong with it. The street name is wrong, the number is wrong. That's Accumail processing. And then lost is, hey, we've lost this person. I don't know what their address is. I can't find them anymore. That's your basic sort of setup, the simplest setup if you want to use bad address mapping. The verbose one could be really crazy. And you can see here, I've basically said all of my Accumail results, I want to be able to detail what is wrong with it, and then all my national change of address stuff. So you can decide how much to delineate on these or not. And we'll talk about those in the next couple slides. Once again, all from our documentation here. You'll see Accumail and NCOA code definitions. Here are all the codes for Accumail that it returns, and here's all the NCOA codes. Now let's talk about Accumail and NCOA. So the way Accumail, or the way iMove works, is it first uses Accumail to determine, is the address real? Real doesn't mean it's correct. As I mentioned before, 855 West Prairie Avenue, it's a real address. 854 West Prairie is not a real address. Okay, so in this case, Accumail is going to look at this and say, is that a real address? If it's not a real address, Accumail is going to return a result code. And that result code can tell us what's wrong with it. Now, once again, the first thing iMove does is it runs it through Accumail to make sure it's a real address. It's not going to look for a move for 854 West Prairie because that doesn't exist in the world, but 855 does. So here are our Accumail result codes. Really, we can see all these different ones, no street address given. Here's what would be returned for 854. The street was identified as an alias, but was out of range restricted for that alias. I think that's what it would be. There's a lot of different, interesting things here. Oh, actually, it would be a 9. The house number could not be matched. These are all codes that mean your address in iMIS is no good. By the way, 0 means it is good, but that is not a code you should be using, because 0 just means we're moving on and seeing if they moved. Okay. But any of these other codes mean we're not going to look for a move because the address is bad. It doesn't exist. Here's our result code mapping that we might do inside of iMove. I might say, look, all of my result codes for Accumail, and those are all numeric, I'm just going to mark them bad in iMIS and mark it as address invalid. So that's a real simple way. I'd pull up someone's record in my database and go, well, it's bad. The address is invalid. Here's the verbose and detailed method where you might actually create codes inside of iMIS to tell you what's wrong with it. I prefaced all of these with bad. You could just put the number in. It doesn't matter. But in this case, you could have a staff member go out there and look at 854 West Prairie, and it would say the house number could not be found. Oh, that's what 09 means. So you get to decide what kind of bad address status you're going to put on. You don't have to. In fact, you don't have to do any of this mapping if you don't want, but this is optional, and iMove's going to go ahead and say, here's why the address is bad, because the address doesn't exist. Now, let's just say we do get a result code of 0, which means we're going to send it on over to the National Change of Address database. Remember, we're only going to do that if a 0 comes back from Accumail. And that means the address has been found and changed, right? And so it doesn't mean that. Sorry, let me correct that. The following codes mean the address has been found and changed. There's only 3 you care about these days. A, N91, and N92. A is a code that says we did find a change of address. And we might say, hey, we found a change of address. And if the address was marked lost or bad in iMIS, we're going to go ahead and erase that bad address flag. N91 means, hey, we found a change of address, but we had to drop some additional information from the change of address result. And N92 says we actually dropped some data from the input address on our matching. This might be where you have suite A and it's not needed, or it returns and it doesn't return suite A. So the only 3 NCOA result codes we truly care about are A, N91, and N92. Now, let's go ahead and think about this a minute, okay? I get a piece of mail returned to me, and it says bad address, or I'm sorry, it says lost. I go into iMIS and I mark that address as lost. I run iMove. It finds a new address. We go clear the bad address flag. That looks like this. A, N91, and N92 all are going to blank out the bad address status or flag in iMIS. These are the most important. If you were to only set 3 things in your bad address mapping, these would be the 3 to go ahead and set. A, N91, and N92. That means if something's in the bad address, we're going to go ahead and erase it. Next up, expired move. This is a brand new result from iMove as of 2.5.4. This says, hey, we did find a change of address. The person moved, but they moved more than 18 months ago, so we don't provide a new address. It's very expensive to do that, and that's why iMove doesn't do that. So right now, if there is a change of address in the postal database, but it's more than 18 months old, we're going to get back an EM status. EM really should be considered lost or bad. The person moved. The fact is they did move, but we've lost the address. It's too late. So you might set that to lost. Here's other optional mapping that you can do. You'll see all of these NCOA result set codes. And you can see here, I might say N91, hey, we found a change of address, but they moved out of the country. So we're not going to be providing a new address. By the way, never use N00. That means there was no match in the national change of address. You can consider that as nothing happened, okay? I took 855 West Prairie Avenue. I took CSI. I sent it out there and it says there's no match, which means CSI hasn't moved, okay? But any of these other ones should be considered an invalid address. So if I run iMove and an N04 is returned by iMove, I can safely assume I have a lost address in iMIS. In other words, I found this online. Pretty straightforward. Forwardable move new address provided as an A, an N91, and an N92. All of these are good moves. These codes mean, hey, we found a change of address, but a new address was not returned. So you can see all of these. There's information where it did find it, but iMove is not going to have an address change for you. And then these are all ones where there was no change of address. So these are the core values that you will see returned by iMove. Once again, I'm going to cover this again. You get to decide, do you want to mark the address or lost or bad, real simple, or mark them with a reason, verbose. If we think about marking the addresses as lost, we're going to take our encodes and we're going to say any of these encodes that return, it's a lost. We don't have a new address. So every one of these addresses in iMIS is now going to be marked lost if the code was returned as one of these. If you're never going to go look at iMIS and you don't care, you just want it to be lost, that's fine. You can use this. Alternatively, we can mark it with a reason. This is going to allow our staff to be able to see what's going on. This requires a lot more codes in your bad address table, but it does provide insight into why the address is bad. So here's an example. In the very beginning, we did this with our Accumail codes. We said anything 1 through 16 is a bad, and we actually said here's why it's bad. So we did that with our Accumail codes. We can do the same thing with our NCOA ones. One, we're going to go ahead and configure our bad address table like we talked about, and then we're going to configure iMove. And it's going to look like this. So you can see here, every return code from iMove is going to set the bad address flag according to why it's a bad address. Here's the verbose method, and this is marking everything, my Accumail codes and my national change of address. So you will see a 1 through 16 based on if it is a bad address, meaning it's incorrect, you could never mail to it. I've got my blank outs that are occurring on N91, N92, and A. My EM I'm setting to a lost. And then all of these other ones I'm basically saying, this is why I can't match. This is going to provide a lot of data in iMIS that you could then go in and figure out why an address is bad. Alternatively, a simple setup looks just like this. My result codes 1 through 16 are just bad. My N codes all say lost, including my expired move code, and then A and N91 are all blank out. Remember, these are the most important ones. If you're using bad address in iMIS, you do want to erase it if we find a change of address. Some final tips. Please remember, run iMove on a regular basis. Moves expire after 18 months. There's nothing we can do on that. Use the verbose setup if you're going to spend time looking into the address issues. If you're never going to look into them, just go with the simple setup. Finally, you don't have to use bad address mapping. It's an optional feature. It's totally up to you how you want to use it. It's totally up to you what you want to do with it. It doesn't matter, but there's some real powerful stuff built into iMove for this. Finally, support at csinc.com for all your support needs. Any new ideas you have for us are ideas@csinc.com, and of course, sales. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the product. We're always looking for feedback.